I've always believed that art conservators are a special kind of detective. We uncover secrets hidden beneath layers of paint, varnish, and time. We reveal the artist's original intent, sometimes discovering pentimenti, those changes the artist made during the creation process. But in my 15 years of restoration work, I never expected to uncover something that would fundamentally change my understanding of reality itself. My name is Dr. Eliza Harmon. I specialize in Renaissance-era paintings at the Metropolitan Museum's Conservation Department. 3 months ago, a private collector contacted our department about a newly acquired piece that needed restoration. The collector, a reclusive billionaire named Victor Reinhardt, claimed the painting had been discovered in the sealed basement of a Venetian palazzo during renovations. It appears to be a minor work from the Venetian school, Reinhardt told me over the phone, his voice carrying the casual confidence of the ultra-wealthy. Probably mid-16th century, but there's something unusual about it. The X-rays show at least 7 distinct layers of painting underneath. 7 layers was unprecedented. Artists occasionally painted over their own work or reused canvases, but 7 complete compositions. That was extraordinary. Send it over, I said, professional curiosity piqued. I'll take a look. The painting arrived the next day in a climate-controlled case. At first glance, it was unremarkable. A standard devotional scene of the Madonna and Child, darkened by centuries of candle smoke and oxidized varnish. The composition was competent, but not exceptional. Likely the work of a studio assistant rather than a master, but the X-rays were fascinating. Beneath the religious scene lay layer upon layer of distinct images, each completely unrelated to the one above it. The topmost hidden layer appeared to be a pastoral landscape. Beneath that, a portrait of a nobleman. Under that, what looked like a mythological scene. This is remarkable, I told my assistant, Maya. It's like a time capsule of artistic styles. Why would someone paint over so many finished works? She asked. That's what we're going to find out. I began the painstaking process of removing the first layer, the Madonna and Child. As the solvent dissolved the old varnish, revealing the true colors beneath centuries of grime, I noticed something odd about the brushwork. It seemed hesitant, almost fearful. The Madonna's eyes, in particular, held an expression not of serene holiness but of warning. As the final bits of varnish cleared, I discovered an inscription in the bottom corner, previously hidden by discoloration. In tiny, careful Latin it read, Tegere malum, cover the evil. That's strange, Maya said, peering over my shoulder. Why would someone write that on a religious painting? Maybe it refers to the layers underneath, I suggested. Perhaps they were covering something controversial. With the first layer fully documented, I began the delicate process of removing it to reveal the second composition. This required a different approach, using a specialized gel that would soften the top layer of paint without damaging what lay beneath. As the Madonna and Child slowly dissolved away, the pastoral landscape emerged. It depicted a sunlit Italian countryside with a small village nestled among rolling hills. But as more of it was revealed, I noticed unsettling details. The villagers in the scene weren't going about normal daily activities. They were running, expressions of terror on their faces. And on the horizon, barely visible, was a dark cloud that didn't look like weather. It looked like a swarm. This is getting interesting, I murmured, leaning closer. The painting's execution was masterful, far superior to the Madonna that had covered it. The artist had captured motion and fear with extraordinary skill. And again, in the corner, another Latin inscription, Sex Restant, 6 remain. I documented the second layer thoroughly before moving on. The pastoral scene with its fleeing villagers was disturbing enough, but what puzzled me more was the countdown. 6 remain suggested that whoever painted these layers was keeping track, moving toward something. The third layer, the portrait of a nobleman, emerged slowly under my careful ministrations. He was dressed in typical 16th century Venetian finery, but his expression was haunted. His eyes seemed to follow me around the room, a technical achievement that reminded me of Holbein's best work. But it was his hands that drew my attention. They were positioned awkwardly on his lap, and as I cleared away more of the overlying paint, I realized why. The nobleman was holding something, a small, ornate box made of what appeared to be black wood. The box was carved with symbols I didn't recognize, neither Christian iconography nor classical motifs. In the corner, Quinque restant, 5 remain. I don't like this, Maya said, stepping back from the painting. There's something wrong about that box. I laughed, though a chill had settled between my shoulder blades. It's just a painting, Maya. Then why did someone bury it under 6 other paintings? She had a point. But professional curiosity drove me forward. The 4th layer was the mythological scene I'd glimpsed in the X-rays. It depicted what I initially thought was the Judgment of Paris, 3 goddesses standing before a seated figure. But as more details emerged, I realized this was no classical myth. The goddesses had distorted features, elongated limbs, and where their faces should be were swirling vortices of paint. The seated figure wasn't Paris, but the same nobleman from the previous portrait, now on what appeared to be a throne. The black box sat open on his lap. Quatuor restant, 4 remain. That night I dreamed of the painting. In my dream, I was standing inside the mythological scene, watching as the nobleman opened the black box. The 3 faceless figures turned toward me, their vortex faces spinning faster, pulling me toward them. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. You look terrible, Maya said when I arrived at the lab the next morning. Maybe we should take a break from this project. I'm fine, I insisted. Just didn't sleep well. The 5th layer was different from the others. It wasn't a complete scene, but a detailed rendering of the black box, now open. Inside was darkness. Not the absence of paint, but actual black pigment applied in thick, deliberate strokes. Around the box were written words in a language I didn't recognize. Letters that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. 3 restant, 3 remain. I found myself working later and later, sending Maya home while I continued alone in the lab. The painting had become an obsession. I needed to know what was beneath all these layers, what the artist was counting down to. The 6th layer shocked me out of my obsessive state. It was a scene of carnage, the same Venetian village from the pastoral scene, but now in ruins. Bodies lay in the streets, buildings burned, and above it all, those same 3 faceless figures from the mythological scene hovered, their forms larger, more substantial. But what truly disturbed me was a small detail in the foreground. A figure that looked remarkably like the nobleman was painting at an easel, his back to the destruction. On his canvas was the Madonna and Child, the very first layer I had removed. Duo restant, 2 remain. I called Victor Reinhardt that night. Where exactly did you get this painting? I demanded, skipping pleasantries. I told you from a palazzo in Venice, he said, sounding amused by my intensity. Which palazzo? Who owned it before you? A pause. The Palazzo Contarini. It belonged to the same family since the 16th century, though the last Contarini died without heirs in the 1940s. The property changed hands several times before I acquired it. Why do you ask? Have you researched the Contarini family history? Not extensively. They were minor nobility, patrons of the arts. There was one, Matteo Contarini, who was something of a black sheep. Rumors of occult interests disappeared under mysterious circumstances around 1574, the usual aristocratic scandal. But I think this painting has a story to tell about Matteo Contarini. I spent the next day researching the Contarini family instead of working on the painting. Matteo Contarini appeared in few historical records, but what I found was intriguing. He had studied at the University of Padua, focusing on natural philosophy and what they then called Hermetic arts. He traveled extensively in the East, returning to Venice in 1570, with what one account described as curiosities of dark provenance. Most tellingly, I found a letter from a contemporary who claimed Matteo had discovered a method to capture and contain malevolent spirits through the application of sacred geometry and pigments derived from unusual sources. The letter warned that Matteo had gone too far in his experiments, and that what he has trapped may soon trap him. Matteo Contarini disappeared in 1574. The official family history claimed he died of fever while traveling in Greece, but no body was ever returned to Venice. Armed with this context, I returned to the painting. The 7th layer awaited me, just one more barrier before whatever final image lay at the bottom of this strange palimpsest. This layer was different from the start. The paint was thicker, applied with more urgency. It showed an artist's studio, presumably Matteo's, with the black box open on a table. Around it were arranged 7 blank canvases. Matteo himself was depicted in the act of painting, but his face was contorted in fear or pain. Through the window of his studio, Those 3 faceless figures could be seen approaching across the Venetian lagoon, the water blackening beneath them. Unum restate, 1 remains. I worked through the night removing this layer, my hands shaking with exhaustion and anticipation. As dawn broke through the lab windows, I prepared to reveal the final 8th layer, the original painting that had started this strange sequence. Should we wait for Maya? My rational mind suggested. No time, another part of me insisted. Need to see it now. The final layer was different. The canvas itself seemed to change as I removed the overlying paint, becoming darker, heavier somehow. The image that emerged was simple yet terrifying. The 3 faceless figures, now in full detail. They weren't human, weren't anything I could properly describe. Their bodies were elongated, jointed in impossible ways, their skin a mottled gray-green. Where their faces should be were not the painted vortices of the earlier depiction, but actual depressions in the canvas, as if the material itself had been pulled inward, creating 3-dimensional spirals that seemed to recede into infinite darkness. At the bottom of the painting, no countdown remained. Instead, in the same careful Latin, Liberati sunt, they are freed. I stepped back, nearly tripping over my stool. The painting seemed to pulse in the early morning light, those 3 vortex faces spinning slowly. I felt dizzy, nauseated. The room seemed to tilt around me. Dr. Harmon? I jumped at Maya's voice, knocking over a tray of tools. Maya, I didn't hear you come in. She stared past me at the painting, her face draining of color. What is that? The final layer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting isn't the word I'd use. She approached cautiously. Those faces, they look like portals, I finished for her, or vortices. We need to cover this up, Maya said suddenly, backing away. Right now. What? Why would we do that? This is an unprecedented discovery. Can't you feel it? She was at the door now. It's watching us. Those aren't faces, they're eyes or windows. Something is looking through. I turned back to the painting, ready to dismiss her fears as superstition. But as I looked at those swirling vortices, I realized she was right. I wasn't looking at them. They were looking at me. And they recognized me from my dreams. Maya, I said slowly, get the camera. Document everything, then help me cover this. But when I turned around, Maya was gone. That's when I noticed the change. The vortices were spinning faster now, the canvas itself seeming to bulge outward. The air in the lab felt thick, charged with static electricity. My phone died suddenly, the lights flickered, and I heard a low, vibrating hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I should have run. Any rational person would have. But I'm a scientist, a conservator. My instinct was to observe, to document. I grabbed my digital camera from the workbench and began taking photos, my hands shaking so badly that most of them came out blurred. Through the viewfinder, I saw something the naked eye had missed. Thin, almost translucent tendrils were extending from the vortices, reaching out from the canvas into the real world. They moved like smoke, but had substance, curling and probing the air. I lowered the camera, but the tendrils were invisible to my unaided eye. I raised it again. There they were, now extending further, reaching toward me. That's when I ran. I made it as far as the door before the lights went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I felt something cold brush against my ankle. The humming grew louder, resolving into what sounded almost like words in a language too ancient for human comprehension. With fumbling hands, I found my phone and activated its flashlight. The weak beam illuminated the painting, which now hung suspended in midair. Those vortex faces fully 3-dimensional, spinning rapidly. The tendrils I'd seen through the camera were visible now without aid. Dozens of them, filling the room like the tentacles of some cosmic octopus. One wrapped around my wrist, ice cold and strong as steel. I screamed, dropping my phone. In the darkness, I felt more tendrils encircling my limbs, my torso, my neck. They were pulling me toward the painting, toward those hungry vortices. With my free hand, I reached blindly for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a bottle. Solvent, paint stripper, I didn't know or care. I hurled it at the floating painting. The bottle shattered against the canvas, chemicals splashing across the surface. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The painting shrieked. There's no other word for it. A sound that threatened to shatter my eardrums. The tendrils convulsed, tightening painfully before releasing me. I collapsed to the floor as the painting thrashed in midair, the vortices spinning so fast they blurred. Then abruptly everything stopped. The painting fell to the floor with a mundane thud. The lights flickered back on, the air cleared. I lay there gasping, certain I had hallucinated the entire episode. Sleep deprivation, chemical fumes from the restoration process. There were plenty of rational explanations. Then I saw my wrist. Where the tendril had gripped me was a perfect ring of bruises, already darkening to purple. With trembling hands, I pulled myself up and approached the fallen painting. The chemicals had damaged it, dissolving parts of the paint to reveal yet another layer beneath, a ninth layer that hadn't appeared on any of our scans. This final hidden layer showed a face, my face, rendered in a Renaissance style but unmistakably me, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident. In the painting, I was seated at a restoration table, working on this very painting. The date next to the signature read 1574. I don't remember much of what happened next. Security footage later showed me gathering my things and leaving the lab calmly, though I have no memory of this. I apparently went home, packed a bag, and booked a flight to Venice that departed 3 hours later. I found myself standing before the Palazzo Contarini 2 days later, drawn there by compulsions I couldn't explain. The building was undergoing extensive renovations, just as Reinhardt had said. Construction workers moved in and out, carrying debris. One of them carried a familiar black box. "Stop," I called out, rushing toward him. "Where did you find that?" The worker, startled, nearly dropped the box. "In the wall," he said in accented English. "Many old things in these walls. I need to see it," I said, reaching for the box. "Signora, this is not permitted." But I had already taken it from him. The box was exactly as depicted in the paintings. Small, made of some black wood I couldn't identify, carved with those same unrecognizable symbols. It was sealed shut with what looked like wax. "Signora, please." The worker reached for the box, but I turned away, breaking the seal with my thumbnail. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. With shaking hands, I unfolded it to find a letter written in faded ink. The handwriting was eerily familiar, identical to my own. "To myself," it began in English, not Italian or Latin. "By the time you read this, you will have already freed them. Do not blame yourself. It was always going to happen this way. Time is not linear but cyclical. I am you. You are me. We are the unwitting instrument of their return." The letter continued, explaining how Matteo Contarini had trapped 3 ancient entities using a combination of art and ritual magic. He had bound them within layers of painting, each layer a seal, each image a prison. But the entities were patient. They could wait centuries for the right person, someone with Matteo's blood, someone with the skills to undo his work. Someone like me. The letter ended with a postscript. "Look at your reflection when you can. Your eyes have already begun to change." I dropped the letter, fumbling for my phone. With shaking hands, I opened the camera app and switched to the front-facing camera. My eyes were no longer my own. Where irises and pupils should be were tiny, spinning vortices. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been hiding in a small pension in Venice, trying to understand what's happening to me. The vortices in my eyes grow larger each day. I've started having dreams or visions of other worlds, ancient cities built by non-Euclidean geometry, oceans of liquid darkness teeming with consciousness. Sometimes I wake to find I've been painting in my sleep. Always the same 3 figures, always with those vortex faces. The paintings seem to disappear by morning, though the landlady has complained about strange sounds from my room at night. I've tried researching the Contarini family further, looking for any clue about how to reverse what's happening. But deep down I know it's too late. I've become part of the cycle. The entities needed someone to free them, and now they need someone to help them remain here. A vessel, an anchor to this reality. Yesterday I received a text from Maya. "The painting is gone. Reinhardt took it. Are you okay?" I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'm becoming something else? That when I look in the mirror now, I sometimes see one of those faceless figures looking back? This morning, I found myself at an art supply store, purchasing canvases and paints. My hands selected specific pigments without conscious direction. Rare earths, minerals, compounds with names I didn't recognize. I bought 7 canvases. Tonight I'll begin painting. First, a Madonna and child to hide what lies beneath. Then 6 more layers, each one a seal, each one a prison. I understand now what Matteo Contarini did. He couldn't destroy the entities, so he trapped them the only way he knew how. Through art, through layers of reality captured in paint and canvas. And when they eventually corrupted him, used him as they're using me, he ensured the cycle would continue. Round and round, century after century. I don't know if anyone will read this account. I'm leaving it here as a warning, though I know it won't matter. When the time comes, perhaps centuries from now, another conservator will discover my paintings. They'll be curious about the layers beneath. They'll begin the careful process of restoration, and the cycle will continue. If you're reading this and you work in art conservation, I have one piece of advice. Some paintings are meant to stay buried. Some restorations should never be attempted. And if you ever encounter a painting with multiple layers, with Latin inscriptions counting down, with 3 figures whose faces seem to swirl and shift when you're not looking directly at them, cover it up. Seal it away. Before you become part of the restoration yourself.
The story you've just heard has ended, but the darkness lingers on. If you enjoyed your descent into terror with us tonight, remember that Midnight Macabre thrives on your fear and your support. Like this video to summon more tales from the shadows. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell if you dare. The entities we speak of may visit at any hour, and you wouldn't want to miss their arrival. Share your own encounters with the unknown in the comments below. Perhaps your story will become our next nightmare. For those brave enough to venture deeper into the abyss, our playlist Cursed Collections awaits with more tales of artifacts that should have remained undisturbed. Until next time, remember, not all stories are fiction and not all listeners are human. Sleep well if you can.